So the agenda for today is simple. We are gonna get started on understanding the SOC 2 compliance journey, a very brief overview, because I'm sure a lot of you guys are already in the SOC 2 journey or have good understanding of the literature of it and just want to know how to get it done. And second, we're gonna jump into continuous compliance monitoring and vendor related compliance and risk with Security Scorecard and Sprinto, where they'll be showing you a brief look as to how they can help you with it. And then we're going to go into questions. Now, if there are some questions that Devika will be taking as soon as her section of it is done, so don't worry, you can start posting your questions in the chat, and it should be good to go. So, Devika, are you ready?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Aarti, for having me here. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to talk about SOC 2 to all of you. Just to quickly start on with, I'm going to give a high-level overview of what the SOC 2 journey looks like. SOC 2 in itself is a very flexible framework. It allows organizations to sort of pick and choose the controls that they want to implement and implement it in a manner that it suits their organization's needs or risks, as you call it. So the first step is actually to choose the applicable trust service criteria that SOC 2 has prescribed. The second step is going to be about defining the controls itself. SOC 2's trust service criteria is generally a high-level guidelines on how you can keep your organization and its information safe and secure. But you will need to translate that requirement of SOC 2 into what tech stack you have and what organizational practices that you meet, and translate them into controls that suit your organization, and then go ahead and implement them. So the third point, as you see here, is going to be implementing the controls and remediating the gaps. At this point, SOC 2 provides a smaller milestone for you, which is the type 1 milestone. That is, once you've defined the controls that you're going to be implementing and implemented them one time, you can go in for a type 1 attestation. Type 1 attestation, the auditor is going to be looking at how suitable these controls that you've designed are for your organization and how far does it meet the SOC 2 criteria, right? However, the type 1 is not usually the final milestone for many organizations. Most of what your prospects are going to be asking you for is a type 2 attestation. That is, type 2 typically means whether you are operating these controls for a longer period of time effectively. So let's look at maybe take an example of a control of background verification. Let's say in the third step, I have defined a control for my organization, and I'm saying that I will conduct a background verification for all my new hires. That is a one-time activity I would have done in the past, but in a type 2, I'll have to continue maintaining this activity for a period of any time between 3 to 12 months and collect evidence that between the 3 months or 6 months, I have implemented this control for all the new hires who have joined within that period, document the evidence, and that's when you go in and share that evidence and get attested for type 2. So once you're in the third step, you can essentially go for a type 1, go through the audit, get attested, and then you would go in for the fourth step, operate it for a period of time, then go in for the type 2 audit, and then get attested again. So that's the overall journey or the overview of SOC 2. In the next step, Aarti, if we could move forward into the next slide. Yes. So in the next step, I'm going to be quickly showing you what are some of the major challenges or use cases that I at least tend to hear from prospects or customers who are going to be implementing SOC 2 for the very first time or have implemented it using traditional methods in Excel or maintaining these evidences over drives have asked me. And I'm quickly also going to simultaneously show you how the dashboard itself or the Sprinto platform is going to be your partner in need as you go through the SOC 2 compliance journey. I can quickly share my screen. Perfect. Okay. I hope my screen is visible. Aarti, if you can confirm.
Yep, it's visible.
Perfect. Yes, so one of the most common questions that come to me is in that second step, right? How do you define your controls that need to apply to your organization? How do I translate what SOC 2 is telling me to do into what I need to do on my AWS as an infrastructure or on my code base or in my people ops team? What are the measures that I would have to implement? So that translation or that compliance knowledge comes baked into a platform like Sprinto, where it's as simple as just enabling or clicking on enable of a framework, where you can see that here in this demo account, I have SOC 2 enabled. This essentially enabling a framework will essentially activate the controls that you have on the platform. When I say controls, these are just typically statements which explain what you have to do for SOC 2. I can take the example that I'd taken earlier. Here I have a control that says that entity will ensure that all the new hires undergo a background verification. You can have similar controls like entity will ensure that my dashboard or my databases are all encrypted, or ensure that backups are taken from my databases, and so on and so forth. So it's as simple as just enabling SOC 2 and you get to activate all of these controls onto your dashboard. And again, it is still flexible for you. It is the questions that I get around using a tool is how flexible are you? Is it rigid that I have to implement all of these controls within my organization? Sprinto provides utmost flexibility at every step along the way. I'm going to show you that as well. At this step, Sprinto allows you the flexibility to choose the controls that you want to implement and not choose the controls that you cannot implement at this point, or maybe indefinitely as well. It'll also translate and show you which of the SOC 2 criteria you might not meet because you are not implementing a certain control or you disable a certain control, right? Once the control has been established, now it's about the continuous monitoring. So another question that I typically tend to get is, how can I ensure or continuously monitor that I'm meeting this control or I'm having a gap as I go through this journey? In traditional assessments, wherever I am going through Excel sheets and maintaining a record of all of these activities, it's a very tedious process, and it provides a lack of visibility into how far have I met a control. And that is where a compliance automation tool like Sprinto brings in the advantage, or I'm going to introduce a concept called check here. That is, a control is a high-level statement, but I want to ensure that every new hire has this documented. So the every granular level that I'm getting into is what is called as a check on the platform, right? How do I collect evidence against each of these activities, and will that become a tedious process for me, is the next question that I typically tend to get from anybody going through a SOC 2 journey. So ensuring that checks are met, the first activity or the way in which we collect this evidence is using integrations. Most companies tend to use various SaaS tools today, like cloud providers, ticketing tools, identity providers, code bases, versions control systems, and so on and so forth. It should be a bare minimum requirement for us to be integrating with those tools and pulling in those information as evidences and ensuring you're maintaining those activities there. So I'll quickly show you how some of these integrations work. I can take the example of AWS. If I happen to integrate with AWS, I can fetch the list of my infrastructure assets from AWS. And here is where that control gets translated into what I actually need to do. I can take a look at one of the assets of a database. A database has various checks that are running on it. Let's say you need to enable backups, you need to take care of encryption, a few other monitors that you have to set up. Sprinto is going to show you exactly what you need to do for different kinds of tech stack, for different kinds of use cases, and let you implement them. Also, I mentioned flexibility earlier. That flexibility exists at the most granular check level on Sprinto as well, where let's say you do not want to implement a particular requirement for any said reason, temporarily or indefinitely, you could mark it as a special case or provide an exception with a reasoning, so that you're doing this as a business as usual activity. You're not scrambling for these reasons at the time of the audit. Once you integrate, Sprinto is continuously monitoring them at various points in time, and at any point you're not able to meet it, you could provide the reasoning as to why. Another thing that I would like to bring everyone's attention to is how integrations can be very smart and adaptive in nature. Let's say I use a tool like Jira, which is a ticketing platform, right? A ticketing platform can be used in various different ways. I can sort of use Jira to maintain all of changes in my code. I can also use it for access control. That is, anytime I want an access to a system, I raise a ticket and some team provides me access to that tool. So one time you integrate with Jira on Sprinto, you would be able to use it in different contexts, or Sprinto adapts the integration to various use cases that you would require for SOC 2. So SOC 2 requires you to maintain change management of code, which means that I would be able to track my Jira integration in change management and track all of the tickets and the necessary downstream activities. I would also be able to use the Jira integration in Access. So let's say I have a user ID and I've requested for access, I would be able to map that ticket and ensure that access control requirements of SOC 2 are also met using the same integration. So that is another flexibility that Sprinto provides at any point in time for the different kinds of integration that you do. That generally covers the continuous compliance monitoring section. The second major challenge that typically companies come across is I have trouble in reporting these activities. When I maintain these different evidences across drives and evidences, and drives and Excel sheets, it becomes very difficult for me to report it to the necessary stakeholders within the company. So putting together the integrations and all the other activities that you're doing, a compliance automation tool like Sprinto would provide you with a dashboard, which shows you how many of the controls are ready, how many need more work. And to even get into a more granular line, it would show you what is your pending work on every framework that you opt for. And what are the granular activities? How much time do I have left to fix this activity? And who is it assigned to? And so on and so forth. This way, you're having a live visual of how far of compliance have you achieved, how much more is there to go, and you're sort of continuously maintaining this during your type 2 period. As soon as you finish integrating and completing all of the setups, Sprinto is your structured action plan. All you have to do is just continue to tick the action items on Sprinto and you will be good to go for an audit. Lastly, the problem that also arises in most SOC 2 audits, whoever undergoes in a traditional manner, is to undergo the audit itself. Now, all of these evidences that you've gathered needs to be put in front of an auditor, explained to them, and tell them which control or criteria of SOC 2 that it really meets. This can be a very daunting and scary process for most companies. Here is where, again, a compliance automation tool like Sprinto would provide you the ability to create an audit. And how Sprinto does this differently is Sprinto allows you to create any forward-looking or backward-looking audits. And not just that, it allows you to keep your audit activities separate from your day-to-day activities. So you're able to keep a few checks or activities that you have to get done within the audit period, and that's separate from your day-to-day security practices that you're seeing on the dashboard. This ensures that nothing goes, nothing falls into the cracks when you're going into the audit. And finally, once your audit ready, you could share this dashboard with the auditor and they would have access to the evidences in a manner that they would like to see. There is all of the criteria and the controls listed down, and every evidence, they would be able to click on the evidence and go through, they would be able to click on the evidence and go through what are the details you've maintained in your platform, go back in time and see what the status was like during the 3-month or the 6-month type 2 period. They would be able to download these evidences as a requirement for the audit and so on, making your audit back and forth much seamless. You're cutting out on all of the unnecessary conversation you would have to have with the auditor and the time that you have to spend in explaining to an auditor on what are the evidences that you've maintained. That's generally what I had for you today. So the 3 main problems that Sprinto helps you cover is your continuous monitoring using integrations. It facilitates your reporting in a much seamless manner. And finally, even getting through the audits become quite seamless when you have a partner in place like Sprinto. Overall, I know SOC 2 might seem like a very difficult or a complex activity on the outset, but it is an essential activity nonetheless. Choosing a right kind of compliance automation partner can make this easy on you, and the momentum turns in 10x if you choose the right kind of tool. I am hoping that I was able to give you some pointers or some things that you have to keep in mind when you choose the right kind of tool. Happy to take any questions that you may have.
All right. Thank you so much, Devika, and also very succinctly put. Now, we will be getting to the questions in the end with a dedicated Q&A session. I will now have it. Have Brent on stage, where he will be now sharing how Security Scorecard can help with risk management. And I am just going to share my screen right now. Yes, Brent, over to you.
Sure. Thanks. Hello, everybody. Excellent breakdown there, Devika. Thank you. So I'll start by explaining what Security Scorecard is and how it kind of fits into your SOC 2 journey. We are a company that scans the entire IPv4 internet. and pulls in data and can associate it with things like compliance controls. If you can go back to the previous one there, one of the ways that this can help you is if you are preparing for something like a SOC-2 audit, when you have third-party vendors that are built into your infrastructure or highly integrated with your workflows, they're kind of an extension of your security practices. So understanding how well that they're adhering to security practices will be very important for you, actually understanding how well you are. And that also has a lot to do with data protection. If you are handling customer data and moving it through the workflows of third-party vendors, then their practices are an extension of your own as well. So if you want to go ahead and move on to that next section. Yeah, so the idea here is that we want to take this kind of robust data that we get from scanning the full IPv4 internet and give you kind of a first view of how compliant those companies are with the various controls related to the type of compliance that you're trying to get. Now, one of the main things as you're preparing for any audit is scope. And when we're looking at absolutely everything on the attack surface, we don't get to take that into account, but it does give you kind of a starting point for that conversation. If we found things that appear to be in conflict with these various controls, it can be something for you to sort out with your vendors. So if you want to go ahead and move on to the next one there. So the idea here is that our compliance section within Security Scorecard gives you a quick view of what we know from our scan data to be in adherence with or violation of the compliance frameworks that you care about, give you the ability to look at any organization that you're monitoring through that lens, and just have a quick way to sort of summarize how your involvement with another vendor might affect your compliance with SOC 2 or any framework that you're concerned with. So I can jump into the platform here and kind of show you how that looks. Let me share my screen here. All right, that should be coming through. And to be fair, I am showing Security Scorecard through this view. But the idea is that there is, in any given scorecard that we're monitoring, there is a set of issues that are discovered. There's these different, what we call score factors that we're looking at. How is the network security? How is the DNS health? Are there out-of-date systems? And we can roll that information up into a compliance view. So if we take the different controls that are in CIS, that are in SOC 2, and say, okay, there is data that we scan for that is related to this particular control, but all of the data that we scan for that's related, in this case, the last time it was scanned, there were no issues. So we can give you that kind of positive side of the story. And we can also say, for this particular control, we found some data where there appears to be a conflict. So that can be a starting point for the conversation with you and that vendor to say, you've said that you're SOC 2 compliant. We're seeing in a scan of your environment that there may be this issue. And then they might say, true on that asset, but that's not in scope of how we interact with you, that sort of thing. But it kind of enables that quick view and the ability to see where everyone stands and where to start the conversation. So yeah, go ahead and unshare my screen there, and I think we can charge on ahead.
Yes. So I'm just gonna. I'm just trying to figure this out. Yeah, I'm just gonna add everyone to the stage. Yes. So I just wanted to thank you both for the walkthrough. We've received a couple of questions. As this is now the Q&A time, so please feel free to ask your questions. The first one comes from, how can companies effectively scope their systems and processes to be included in a SOC 2 assessment? So, Brent, you want to take this?
Yeah, I think this is definitely probably the most interesting step for someone coming into this for the first time. When you want to share like a SOC 2 report with your potential clients, it only matters that you're showing them which systems are actually relevant. Like, you're not going to show them your entire development environment. You're not going to show them absolutely everything. But something that I think is very important to look at first with that is an understanding of a mapping of the flow of the relevant data. So you want to understand, where would my customer's data be going? What systems would have direct access to it? And maybe mapping that just in a boxes and arrows kind of way. This is where private data would be. This is where sensitive data would be stored. This is the systems that would have access to it. Once you have that kind of boxes and arrows understanding of the parts of your system that would actually touch and interact with their data, that can be a really good way to see what's in scope. And what you'll probably also find along that path is which vendors of yours have infrastructure or software that are actually part of that chain, so that you can know, okay, it's time to look to them as well, because they seem to be part of this equation. So yeah, I would say just first getting a clear understanding of where your client or interested party, whoever you're doing this activity for, where their relevant data would move through your systems and which systems touch that data.
Okay. Devika, do you have anything to add to it?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Brent has mentioned. So the scoping exercise is all about identifying which data you want to protect. And in this case, it's going to be the customer's data, which is processed by the product or the service that you're offering, right? You draw a boundary around it, and then there are various gateways that sort of have access to this data. So that could be the people within your company. So then you have to put some measures there. Then there is the networks or the infrastructure that has access to this data. There could be your code bases that have some touch points with accessing this data. There are vendors that have access to this data. So then it's all about identifying what are the gateways that have access to this data, and then putting across measures that you protect each of them. It could even be your physical space or your office where you have these data present. So it's all about identifying that data and where it flows through, and then you sort of put measures accordingly.
Okay, I hope that answered your question, Aminav. The next one is, we are live on both LinkedIn and YouTube, and we got a question from a LinkedIn viewer who asked, how can an organization determine if it's the right time to pursue SOC 2 compliance? Who wants to go first?
I can jump in first. Yeah, I think this is a great question. There's sort of a point where this is no longer, is this something that we should do? If you're a B2B company, if you're going to be handling data on behalf of another business, this will eventually become the cost of doing business. This will become a license to operate. It'll be part of every RFP or RFP-like communication that you have with your potential clients. And at the higher levels, it's almost kind of expected. Like, okay, can we get a copy of your SOC 2 report? So, but the when, I think, comes down to what type of data you're going to be handling on your client's behalf will determine the speed with which this becomes a necessary hurdle for you to clear. If you know that you're going to be handling sensitive data for your clients, and you want to rapidly grow that number of clients, then I think it's probably something to start thinking about as soon as possible, because when it comes to security and compliance, finding the resourcing internally to prepare for and be ready for this sort of thing is something that can catch a lot of people off guard, and you don't want to rush your testing and rush your planning when it finally comes time to do it. So I would say, yeah, the TLDR on that is, if you know you're going to be handling sensitive data for other businesses, start thinking about being ready to do that now.
Devika, anything to add to it?
Yeah, in my experience, it's again about data sensitivity. If you have very sensitive data that you process, then obviously you need to get in line and start looking at information security more closely. However, also if you do know that you're going to be looking at enterprise scale customers, especially in the US, this starts becoming a very important, uh, most likely like a table stakes requirement for any sales engagement that you are going to have with the company. That's about it. I hope that answers the question.
Right. And we have one more from YouTube. So this thing is the right way to sign off the last question. How do platforms like yours help handle edge cases when it comes to compliance and audit? This is the ultimate pitch moment right there for both of us.
Do we want to keep going in the same order? I'll take a shot at it first. So I would say that anything that you weren't expecting to find is going to be an edge case. A lot of people, when it comes to security and compliance, there are written policies. Here's how we're supposed to do things. There are agreements between teams. IT has said that the developers need to use this system. And the most interesting thing that you find is, who's found a way around that policy? How is it actually being implemented when the rubber hits the road? And I would say that these types of monitoring are kind of for the edge cases, for the things that you weren't expecting. From the security scorecard perspective, when looking at your own scorecard, it can be interesting to see, okay, against these various controls for compliance, what did you find? Oh, I didn't realize that asset had that, setting out of place. That actually might be in scope for an audit. Hey team, let's get on that. Or we have this vendor and we've needed to install their database software right in the core of our cloud infrastructure. It's a trusted system now. And when we look at their systems, it looks like they have a lot of, some poor patching cadence or some things that might be concerning. We better start that conversation with them now. So I would say anything that catches you off guard is an edge case, and this type of monitoring is how you find the things that could surprise you later before you're in the midst of audit findings, which you don't want to have.
Yeah, I also completely agree with Brent on this point. Answering it from a very Sprinto point of view, a compliance automation tool like Sprinto is essentially used to avoid such edge cases, and so that all of these gaps and you're able to remediate them promptly is one of the ways or one of the reasons why you would use a tool like Sprinto rather than going in for a traditional approach. Especially with Sprinto, there is the baseline that we look for, or the ultimate philosophy that we go by is, at any point of time, any finding that you come across as a gap within your system, it is very important for you to track it then and there, not scrambling for the evidences or the reason why you weren't able to meet this at the time of an audit. So at every point in time, whenever Sprinto gives you an alert, we have provided in the flexibility for you to add in reasons or push this temporarily or push this indefinitely, provide reasons which get gathered for your evidences and are shown to the auditors later, making this a much more robust program. You're not going around looking at different teams and verifying what the reasons are, but you're having a collaborative approach towards whatever is happening then and there in the present, and not looking at security as or an audit in the past. Like, you're going to look at it on a day-to-day basis. That's generally how we help handle edge cases. There are quite a lot more features and things that we could talk about in depth. I'm sure Brent agrees as well. We should, I think, please do reach out in case you want to know more about these specific features that we could go into depth about.
Thank you so much, Brent and Devika. We are right on the time, so we will be wrapping up this session. For those who are interested to know more and get like a detailed platform demo of both Security Scorecard or Sprinto, feel free to check us out. I have also linked all of our emails and demo links on the PPT, which I'll be sharing as well as soon as this is over. So thank you so much for taking the time for joining this session. I hope you found it informative. I hope it answered some of the questions that were on top of your mind. And if you want to see how either of us can help you understand the SOC 2 journey further and help you power it, then you've come to the right place. So with that, thank you, Brent and Devika, and have a nice day, everyone.